Thank you, everyone. We are starting this meeting. I think that's everyone from the waiting room, and I'm going to turn it over to Shannon.
Good evening, everybody. Today is Thursday, May 27th. It is 5:02 p.m. Is the Maple Run, we are the SRO committee meeting for this evening. I'm going to call to order this meeting. I'm going to do an agenda review. Did everybody get a chance to see the agenda that everybody on the committee that we had sent out? And just give me a thumbs up on that if you don't mind. Perfect. And then we're going to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes? Alexis, thank you. Can I get a second? Mike, thank you. And then Emma, you have some updates. You said to the admin updates for this evening.
I do. Thanks, Shannon. From the last meeting on May 13th, there were a couple pieces that we said we would get back to folks about, and I just want to report back on that very briefly and let people know where they can find that information. So we had a whole slew of questions raised last meeting on two fronts. One, the small group presentation, we call it like the future of the SROs. So this was largely on the staff and student surveys, as well as just kind of the future orientation of the school community. So there were questions from that presentation as well as the SRO interviews. So those were answered in detail, and the question as they came in through the chat is what we use as the prompt. Those are posted on the committee website, which I'll put in the link in a minute, under the future folder, because that was sort of the theme last time. The second thing we have provided and completed since the last meeting is a more disaggregated survey analysis of both the student and staff surveys based on gender identity, racial identity, and other identities we could break down into a more detailed piece that didn't get too small per everyone's request last time, or several folks I should say last time. That's also posted in that future folder, which you can find on the website. Special thanks to Leah Fitzgerald, who serves on this committee and will be a little late tonight. She's a student who helped with some of the data transfer work for me. And also Alexis, who did some other survey backend stuff for another task we had to do with data. That was very helpful. So thank you to both of you for that help. And the final pieces we received, actually two final pieces, we received an additional personal statement since the last meeting. So you can find that posted in our personal statements folder, which is also linked to the website. And then finally tonight, I'll say this a couple times because I know that's what the folks are probably most curious about. In a super pencil draft form of proposals. They were posted a couple days ago on our website, but the proposals that will be the starting off point for the discussion tonight are also posted on the website. You can find that under the public agendas and minutes folder. So again, if you go to the SRO community website, you'll find that under the public agenda and minutes site. There's three possible jumping off points there, including some additional thoughts that came in through a series of different resources. I'll go over that again a little bit later and repeat that, but I just want to make sure if folks want to pull that up now, that's where you can find it. And I will pass, oh, and we have someone taking minutes, so I'm going to pass back to Shannon. Thank you.
And yeah, thank you, Emma. Yes, and Kathy Fuller is going to be taking minutes for us this evening. Thank you, Kathy, for doing that. So we are going to open up the visitor public comment part of our meeting this evening. And if you'd like to make a comment or address the committee, you are welcome to put your name in the chat function. And I will read off those names, and we will go ahead and listen to the community.
And a reminder, while Shannon does that, as we've done before, we have about 2 minutes, and I will do a friendly wave a couple times to just as friendly as possible, ask you to wrap up that thought. And so actually someone has messaged me. So Kate LaRose would like to speak, Shannon. Did you hear me, Shannon? Kate LaRose messaged at me and would like to speak.
Okay, Kate, go ahead and you can unmute. And Kate, I'm going to ask you, as we do in every meeting, to follow the guidelines and acknowledge that you understand those before we hear comment. And those guidelines are to speak from your personal experience and understanding, listen to understand someone's lived experience, question and disagree with ideas, not people, honor people's identity by believing their lived experience, no personal attacks, and acknowledge the difference between intent and impact, and take responsibility for the negative impact of your actions and words. You agree to that tonight, Kate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I wanted to start by thanking the committee for their broad outreach to staff, community, parents, guardians, students on this issue. And as often is the case in these stories, that's where we find life breathed into the research findings. The research itself is clear, but it's through the comments that in these surveys, some of which were highlighted at previous meetings, that I think really when the consideration of what option should be taken, it's in these comments. And I know some of the comments were highlighted at previous meetings, and the responses themselves from the surveys were quite substantive. So some of them deserve to be given voice, and I wanted to go through that tonight for my comment. So I'll read through those. Abolish it. I would like to get rid of it. It is at best a ticking time bomb waiting to hurt more students than it already is. And I should say this is parents and guardians. Remove it and spend the money on services that will actually make kids safer. Mental health services, after school programming, money for the arts. Remove them. Once we can recognize that law enforcement's job is to not be a friendly visitor, a social worker, or cleanup crew for traumatized students, our SRO could potentially be used to be available to protect the school from outside threats. The irony of the SRO program is that there is no evidence that it builds trust and positive long-term relationships in children. We arrest an increasing number of adults and children in this community. Many community members and children will never look at law enforcement differently. Throwing a person in uniform in our schools does not improve community relationships over time. Those who support SROs tend to come from families who have more wealth and can financially afford to adequately defend themselves from accusations. Please don't have police presence. Eliminate it. Replace it with security upgrades in schools and more de-escalation training for staff. My daughter had a negative interaction with a police officer at her school. My daughter, who was never ever in trouble, was spoken to after a fender bender that ended with no insurance or money being exchanged. The SRO told my daughter that she could go to jail and traumatized her. She will now not call the police no matter what. Restorative specialists and counselors belong in schools, police do not. The SRO at my Vermont high school in a different district used a taser on multiple students and was used as a threat by school staff. They are a hostile presence in our schools that convey a militaristic need to control our students. It is unnecessary and harmful to the health and sanity of future citizens. Terrible experience because the previous SRO handcuffed a child and used a slur. The SRO comes from the SAPD, a police department rife with multiple documented instances of excessive force. Consistent
We're about at
inability.
2 minutes. We're just about at 2 minutes here.
Okay.
Sorry.
There's so many. I'll end with children are not criminals. We do not need law enforcement in schools.
Thank you, Kate.
Shannon, the next up is Ryer Erickson.
Okay. Ryer, do you agree to abide by the guidelines and acknowledge and understand and agree to them before speaking?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to speak tonight from a student point of view. I think too often we have focused this on what adults want and not enough on what students want. And I just want to make sure that we are cognizant of what students stand. And so I wanted to read a few results from the survey that students gave. I think all SROs should be removed from schools because of kids who are triggered by the sight of an officer, because school is supposed to be a safe space, and my experience with SROs have made school the opposite. Through the presence or lack thereof of SROs in BFA does not affect me, there is significant evidence that it does affect BIPOC students. Here's a link to an article that explains it a bit more. Having an SRO in school does not impact my feelings of safety at all. I would rather the SRO stay near the school patrolling the area, but I would not actually want them inside the building. I think all SROs should be removed from schools because of kids who are triggered by the sight of an officer, because school is supposed to be a safe place. I'm not super familiar with the SRO program's purpose, but from the list above, it sounds like the program is really focused around student safety and mental health, and I think that can be done easily without an armed law enforcement officer. I would feel much safer with more mental health officers on campus who are widely available and places to rest and speak with them, have a local officer on standby in case we have a complete emergency. This school is full of children. An officer should not be necessary. And finally, I don't have a good history with police officers, and the male SRO at my school put hands on my brother and left marks. These are words of students, of children. I wonder how many students the board, this committee feels okay with feeling frightened and scared in their school. That's the question I really think you want to ask yourself, not what's more popular, what most people want, none of that. How many students are you okay with being hurt by this program that has verifiably been shown to have 0 positive results. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryer. Jen Williamson. Jen, do you, and you've spoken at previous meetings, but do you agree to follow the guidelines and acknowledge and understand and agree to them before speaking?
Yes, sorry, I'm having technical difficulties.
That's okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, I agree to all the previous things. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you everybody on the committee for all of your service. I really appreciate the hard work that you've done in collecting all of this information and looking at it, you know, and being able to really, you know, take a different view of it, just other than, you know, whatever, you know, anybody in the neighborhood is saying, and really looking at that research and looking at the harm that has been done to individual students. And I too want to, you know, really highlight some of these statements that were made during the information that you guys gathered. I mean, it's just so important to really, you know, look at all of these. So consistent inability to follow protocol, divulging confidential information, interrogation of minors without notifying a parent, and the inability to accurately and safely judge situations and consider all information. Additionally, historically, SROs were used to clean out the school of problem students. I have not had many interactions with them. The one time I did, I was not impressed at all. I felt like he was in the way here to babysit high schoolers, pretend to be their friends. Sound great, right? It doesn't end so well for students or SROs once they've turned them into the office for some kind of violation. Once that situation happens, you have lost all trust of the child, and not just during their time at school, but their trust has been broken for a lifetime. In my honest opinion, there is no need for SROs in our not only in our schools here in Vermont, but across the country. In my own experience, they were used at my high school to do things such as enforce dress code. It was known that they gave preferential treatment to some students and not others. The bad apple defense is old and tired, and nothing but inexcusable perpetuation of white supremacy culture and inherently racist institutions. I'm concerned by some of the social media pages Officer Talley follows and the content it shares. I too am concerned Officer Talley is the SRO at SATEC. My experience has only been secondhand, but I have reviewed the legal docs related to SRO incidences in our own school and elsewhere and have found them disturbing. As a privileged parent.
Oh, excuse me, Jen, sorry, we're at the 2-minute. You can finish up what you were saying, but.
That was it. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for all of your work.
Thank you, Jen. Angie is next. Angie, do you agree to abide by our guidelines and acknowledge and understand and agree to them before speaking?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm joining as a parent of students in the Maple Run School District, and wanted to really to put voice to some of the survey comments that other parents and guardians shared. SROs do not make kids safer in school. Study after study has proven this fact. To believe otherwise is to believe in fantasy and to uphold white supremacy. The money spent on the SRO program should be used to provide services for the kids that will actually keep them safe and the entire learning community safer. The school should be on the right side of history on this subject. Removing the SRO program is not a radical idea. Many other schools in Vermont have done it. Another comment in the survey is, we are not under martial law. Normalizing police presence in schools is anathema to the democratic ideals we've been fighting for throughout our history. If you want an SRO that can be a security guard, then hire an armed security guard that only provides security. If you want to build relationship between children and law enforcement, then grow that in the classroom. However, you should not be using an SRO as your own rent-a-cop to deal with behavioral issues. They are not trained to deal with those situations the same way educators are trained. Another comment, I think the money that pays for an SRO would be much better spent on a full-time psychologist or more counselors or other positions in the school that would help the mental health of students. SROs are not needed at schools. People who are educated in mental health, crisis management, and behavior intervention are needed in our schools. other guardians said studies show that SROs in schools cause direct and proximate harm to students. There is a nationwide movement to remove SROs from schools for this very reason. There is no evidence that SROs stop school shootings, which is the most common argument for SROs. I believe that all students deserve to feel safe and secure in our schools. And as a parent, I echo all of those things. I hear my friends who have children of color at the school with me say that their children are less safe, and I see data back it up. And as a parent, I just want to say there's no good reason to keep a dangerous solution to a problem in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. We have Zach Scheffler. And Zach, do you agree to follow the guidelines and acknowledge and understand and agree to them before speaking?
I do, thanks. Yeah, thank you all for doing the work here. It's tough work. Thank you for listening. I just want to read off some comments from staff, from school staff that I found interesting. I'm a young Vermonter. I've known BFA students, working with them, and and this issue is important to me. Reading these survey results, I found them interesting. But here are a few for you. SROs often escalate children who have experienced trauma in the home, therefore increasing unsafe behavior. I felt as safe before we had an officer here. I felt our students were as safe before we had an officer here. I have worked in the school with and without an SRO and feel no safer with an SRO. The thing that makes me feel safer is the better physical security the building has now, like locked entrances, reflected window coverings, security cameras. Another one, I feel we could call the SAPD and they would be here quickly. We don't need an officer here in the school. Another one, I'm not sure that the presence of the officer is making it safer for me or my students every day, and wonder if it is the most effective use of resources given the issues our students are facing each day. This last one from another staff member. The police have a long and painful history of further marginalizing groups of oppressed people. Looking back to recent history, the police have proven they are a danger to communities of color, to the point where parents have to teach their children of color to not trust the police. It's factually proven that white children have a privilege of being able to trust police and believe they will be safe. This luxury is not extended to communities of color, the queer community, or the disabled community. Additionally, the presence of someone with a gun in the classroom who does not have training in classroom management or mental health feels unethical and intentionally harmful. Those are the ones that stuck out to me. And again, thank you for your work and thank you for listening. I appreciate it. That's all.
Thank you, Zach. Jamila?
Hi, I'm going to try to be really brief, which I'm not great at. But I'm here mostly tonight to provide some clarity when we talk about if it's necessary, when we talk about the Equity Committee's feedback. I just really want to express a deep hope because I have a concern. You've all worked really hard, the folks who've dedicated yourselves to the work of this committee, and my hope is that the conclusion hasn't already been reached by those who are going to be making this decision, and that your work will be deeply considered. I have some concern there, and I wonder if that is not the case, what is next? What is next? So I guess I'm expressing some skepticism and some fear around that, and also some deep appreciation for your work and the folks who've come to comment and express care for this this issue. So I'm hopeful that your work will be considered seriously and with concern. To those who are most impacted by this issue, not most people who chimed in on this issue, right? Focus on those who are most impacted. So that is all I have to say for public comment tonight.
Thank you, Jamila. Anybody else from the community that would like to speak? Please go ahead and put your name in the chat function.
Shannon, I have no other names on my end, just so you know.
I don't have any others on my end either. Okay. We will close out the chat function, or the, excuse me, the community response and public comment. And we will move on to actually the report, Emma, correct, from us, from the Equity Committee.
Yep.
I'm going to do a screen share and I hope this works.
You got it. No anxiety from me. I always have like
Oh,
anxiety when I
gosh.
screen share. You've got this.
Maybe.
And
No.
I'll buy you a little time as you figure that out.
Okay,
So the
thank you.
notes from the Equity Committee meeting with the co-chairs, which we postponed until this meeting, can also be found on our website. And that will be listed under the public documents folder. I was trying to figure out where to place that exactly. So it's under the public documents folder. It's a PDF you can look for. Oh, and I said I was gonna put the website in the chat. I will do that too while Shannon screen shares. Did that buy you enough time?
I think so. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Let's make sure that that is what is up there. Give me one sec here.
Shannon, is the actual notes? Because I can screen that share for that. I can screen share that for you, unless you have another document you're working on. And you're on mute if you're trying to communicate. Shannon is just normalizing my own anxiety, and I do this all the time to screen share on
Sorry,
Zoom.
sorry, my internet connection's not working that great. So hold on one second.
No worries. Okay.
Of course it's not working. Okay, let's do screen share. I apologize, everyone. Okay, Emma, we may just have to do the Word document.
Okay, I'll pull that up and then I can screen share for you and drive. So one second.
Oh, I might. There we go. Okay,
Does this work?
that works. Yep, I'm sorry about that, everyone. So on May 7th of this year, at 1 p.m., I actually did a Zoom meeting with the Equity Committee. Unfortunately, John wasn't able to be there, but I took notes, and there was quite a few members in attendance. M. Johnson, Jennifer Williamson, Meredith Vaughn, Kate Turpin, Jamila, I'm sorry if I pronounce your last name, Vogel, and there was a statement from Jeff Rulo. So what we did was we took their statements, and then we went back and I did create a Google slide, actually. I just can't bring it up right now for whatever reason. And so we took each statement. So these are the statements from each person. And Jamila, you might be able to as well, what each person's role is actually as well. M. Johnson's, her statements. She works in Fairfield as a virtual teacher, I believe is what she had said. And I'm giving voice to her statements that she had made. We should give voice to the BIPOC community. Was the data desegregated, specifically surveyed those most affected? I do not want SROs in schools. They do not make people feel safe based upon the color of their skin. Schools should be and feel safe for all. SROs in schools cause equity issues. For example, if there is an individual that has been targeted because of what they look like and where they come from. The equity issue is a student going to be treated differently. Data shows differential treatment. and we should be spending money on supporting the social and emotional needs of students instead of having an armed presence in the school. Jen Williamson. Thank you, Emma. I do not support SROs in the school as a parent of a neurodivergent child. Students who are neurodivergent, BIPOC, or part of the LGBTQIA are more likely to be arrested or harassed by SROs. Police in general across America and in Vermont and even in St. Albans are more likely to target people in marginalized communities. At least one child was reported in 7 days as being harmed by a Maple Run Unified School District SRO. And even one child is too many, but there are others. SROs are making our schools more of a military zone. Children are being punished for acting childish, and this is not keeping our children safe. When school shooters know there is an SRO in schools, the number of people harmed and the violence of these events escalate. Thursday, when dropping off students at SATEC, the SRO had her dog with her. I wonder if this is an attempt to soften the image of the police department. It is not the responsibility of students to repair the public image of police. Why are we spending so much money on SROs and when they are only making it worse? Students are harassed and traumatized by SROs by just being on campus. I have been told about events in which SROs have abused students to teach them a lesson. Administration has forced their presence on students who are afraid, and despite advice from their healthcare team, and students who hide from them when they see the SRO coming near them. I would like to see Maple Run Unified School District follow Burlington's change regarding SROs and have a liaison in the police department. My brother-in-law, who is a police officer, has advised us to never talk to cops without representation. SROs are training students to think the opposite, which will actually make things worse for them. SROs are dangerous. School is not the place for cops. Meredith Vaughn's statement. SROs do not make me feel unsafe. It is easy to feel SROs are not a problem as we are not making the news, but that does not mean there is a problem. All students and families matter. If we have students that feel unsafe and we need to change so all students feel safe. We need to address a very broken system. And I know a lot of students that have had positive interactions this year and last year with the SROs. Kate Turpin's statement. Kate asked who makes the decision about keeping SROs. I told Kate the role of the SRO committee is to gather information and present it to the school board. The Maple Run Unified School District school board actually has the final decision. Kate said, I'm disappointed to hear the Maple Run Unified School District school board has the final decision. It must be nice to sit on the committee as a white person and listen to Black people and then tell the Black people the community values SROs. I would never put a queer, gay, lesbian, or people of color in a room with a police officer. It is not safe. I am fully expecting our school board to keep the SROs, and this is extremely disappointing. Jamila's statement. I'm opposed to the SRO program. I am concerned with student surveys. You should really be concerned with the response from the BIPOC community. I'm not as concerned about how the white students answered the questions. Your committee should really focus on the BIPOC. It is like able-bodied people weighing in about physical accessibility. There is nothing to do with this. This has nothing to do with the specific SROs. My opposition is not related to the individual quality of the SRO in our district, but rather the relationship between law enforcement and the marginalized communities that have been harmed historically. This has to do with a systemic racism and the current and historic disproportionate harm caused to BIPOC communities in our criminal justice system. Just the mere presence of a police car or a police uniform can cause anger, fear, or a trauma response. A national conversation about police reform and anti-racism is underway. We need to pull back until there is a reckoning with reform. School resources are limited and we do not need to be spending on SROs. We should be sending the money on mental health counselors. We should not be spending money on SROs to try to repair police relationships. I would like to follow and have a police liaison in the, I would like to follow the Burlington and have a police liaison in the police department. Kids are traumatized when SROs go into a classroom. Their body language changes, they cover their heads and they hide in bathrooms. Many of the students at our school are uncomfortable with police officers. In addition, it is not necessarily safe for all of our students, BIPOC students in particular, to be taught to feel comfortable with police when we know they are more likely to be harmed by police statistically. The SRO program does not meet the needs of our kids in schools and arguably does not meet the need originally intended by the program. Is it appropriate to have SROs in our school at this time? SRO funding, where do the sources come from? Where will this funding go back to the schools? What pot of money? And due to the cost and the harm from SROs, there is no reason to keep this program. Jamila, I did see your comment and we'll go back through it, yes. Jeff Rulo's statement, Jeff was not present, but he gave this statement to Jamila to present. Wondered how to hear from students of color without inappropriately singling them out. There are students in our school who feel uncomfortable. There are better uses for the funds. Does the president of an SRO make students of color feel that the school does not care about them? What are the benefits of having an SRO in the building? Is there some tremendous benefit being provided by having an officer in the building, especially considering the cost financially for the district and community, as well as emotionally for the BIPOC students? When we do an analysis of the needs at the school, I would argue that there are much greater needs for mental health support, that funds would be better spent offering those services to our kids that really struggle. There is always the outside chance that an active shooter could enter the building or have a very unruly parent in the building, and have an officer in the building might prevent loss. I would also ask, what exactly is the officer supposed to be doing in the school all day? Has anyone asked for a log of the work being done all day by the officers? I'm not questioning the work ethic of the officers. I'm just asking what they do all day at the school, and are they doing school business or being police officers from a desk in the school? I just feel like a case could be made that there are more pressing needs for students from a mental health standpoint. Going at it from that standpoint would potentially meet the need of all individuals with concerns on both sides. I know this is an emotionally charged subject for people on both sides, but larger discussion of what are the needs at our school, what are the needs at our school and what are the possible avenues for addressing those priorities would be at a more productive discussion, as opposed to pitting political ideologies against one another and having a fight about it. We have limited resources and a plethora of concerns. Let's make the best of what addresses those concerns. Thank you, Emma. Full disclosure, I do have concerns about the impact of the presence of the officer has on BIPOC students, and would include that concern in assessing the cost benefit of the SROs in each building. And then we had a couple of questions on the student survey. Why are there no color or gender options? Limited time taking the surveys, digital surveys, giving the responses from the students of color more weight. Who is answering the survey, and do we think that students and community members that are most affected are responding, or are they likely to respond because they feel that the district is not going to listen to their input? And how can we generate more engagement? The committee also had a couple of recommendations. The Equity Committee suggested that the Maple Run Unified School District School Board have implicit bias training before making any decision regarding the SRO program. It would also be helpful to have some education on the systemic racism and the criminal justice system. And they also asked the Maple Run Unified School District School Board should invite the Social Justice Club to the meeting. So that was a lot of statements from everybody, and I know Jamila is on tonight, and if there are some questions that anybody has, yes, Jamila, I can. So Jamila wanted me to clarify that the notes are not verbatim quotes, but rather a capture of our statements. That is true. We did give it back to, we know we gave it back to you guys to make any adjustments to it as well. And yes, I'm not perfect, and I did transcribe those, but we did give them back to the Equity Committee to make any changes that they did need to.
Shannon, I'll just add for the sake of the public record, because we will be documenting everything for the board for its June 16th meeting. So if there's any points of clarity that you or other members of the committee would like to further do, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to make those further edits so that they're as accurate as possible.
Okay, thank you. And then, so at this time, I mean, any questions? We can take questions. Any of the committee members have questions, or the community, you can enter those into the chat to any of the co-hosts. And I think John's going to read those. I don't see any on my side. Emma or, oh,
I see Bob's hand.
I see Bob's hand.
Yep. Can you just, I think I have a grasp, but can you just explain exactly what the Equity Committee is, who they report to, and how the members were picked? What is
Yeah,
the
I'm gonna ask Jamila if she doesn't mind, if the committee members don't mind. It is, I believe Jamila is the head of the Equity Committee. So if Jamila, if you wouldn't mind, you can go ahead and mute yourself.
Yeah, the Equity Committee from the Maple Run School District is open to community members, parents, staff, school leaders, and students. So it's sort of put out there year after year for folks to join, and it's open for folks who are really interested in more advocacy and learning around more equitable outcomes for all students. So it's a relatively open group, and the folks who came to give their feedback were people, a selection of members, not the entirety of the committee. And they were people who felt very strongly about sharing their feedback on this particular question. I will say that I heard similar feedback and sentiment in many of our meetings, although each member of the committee has their own voice on all things, including this issue. And we did not draft a statement that would falsely represent a consensus, but wanted to have a chance to share some of our thinking and the conversations that we've been having.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions at all?
I see nothing on my end. John, do you see anything on your end?
I have a question that came through. It does not relate directly to the meeting with the Equity Committee, but if we'd like to read that now, we can, or we can hold it till later, whatever seems most appropriate.
Let's see if we can address it now. And per usual, if we can't get the answer, we will get back to folks as soon as we can, only because the next pieces are starting our deliberations, and I want to make sure we try to answer community questions.
The question says, has anyone on this committee or has this committee as a whole received an apology from Superintendent Dearth for his disrespectful comments in VT Digger that indicated he did not have an open mind on this, while this wonderful group of volunteers was putting in hours of their time to make the school district a better place for all students?
So I'll take that one. There's been no formal communication from the superintendent to the committee on that topic. And the committee does have a full, email list that folks are pretty familiar with, who've been engaging with us over the last few months, and there's been no communication. That's as far as I know as the facilitator, and on that list, I don't know if there's been individual outreach, but anyone can certainly raise their hand on the committee if that's otherwise. I don't see any hands. Okay. John, any other questions?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
I have one. One of them is from Jamila, and I think that John and I and Emma can handle that one. It's just something on the back end of stuff. And then Ryer Erickson had one. And he said, "Can you define equity?" Is that meant for me, Ryer, or is that meant for everybody on the committee?
I'm really good at reading.
I just wanted a general definition so that everyone understood what equity meant. I'm sorry.
Well, this committee has not formally developed a general consensus, I would say, on the definition. So we have talked in the beginning in our first couple of meetings. I was actually going to do a little bit of review, we did a little, not by any means a replacement on implicit and explicit bias. We've talked a little bit about decision making that talks about folks most impacted. I'm going to go through that in just a minute, so I'm not going to go too further into that. But we did not pause at any particular moment and come up with a committee consensus on equity formally.
Okay, I don't have anything else in my end. And John, are you good?
Yeah, no more questions at this time.
Okay, so I will close out, Emma, that part, the Q&A from the committee and the community regarding that, and then I'll turn over to Emma.
Okay. All right, folks, so here is our moment to transition into deliberation mode. We've spent many weeks now collecting information, diving deep into resources provided by the community, talking to individuals, talking to groups in the Maple Run district. And now we're at the moment where we're going to roll up our sleeves collectively, do some courageous leadership, and to try to really engage fully as a committee. So I have some things that I just want to walk us through about the process we're going to attempt to use tonight. Per the request from our original charge from the board, which is to strive to use consensus. I want to go over that so folks are familiar with what we really mean, because I think it's casually used a lot, and I want to just be clear about what we're going to try to do tonight. And then also just here's my second reminder, the very draft proposals in hyper pencil, really want to emphasize that are just meant to start off the conversation, can be found under the public agenda and minutes folder on the SRO website, which I put into the link. You can follow along there. I will provide some breakdowns of that in slides, but I'm going to move through it quickly to get us to deliberation. So if you are someone who likes to have that full document up in front of you as things get going, I encourage you to open another window and follow along. All right, so I am going to do my own little panic screen share for a second. Solidarity, Shannon, and here, just to kind of, for the visual learners at home, I'm going, oh, but I can't see myself. All right, here we go. Okay. So just where we are, I just want to do a brief drive-by of some things that the committee has put together over the last couple months to remind us as we get into this conversation. So in the very big first meeting, we went over group agreements, which we have used throughout our process together. And the four I have not highlighted, but bolded here, I really want to encourage for this dialogue going forward to remind you, because it's been a minute, is to really work towards curiosity. It's actually a really good component of consensus, which we'll go over in just a minute. I want to remind everyone that oppression and an unconscious bias exists in this Zoom room, in our daily lives, in our brains. And so it is something that we want to be aware of as you come to this decision-making and deliberative process and your final decision. We want to honor the work and the people. So that includes the people in the room, the people you've talked to, the people who were brave enough to engage in your surveys, the people who were not able, for whatever reason, to engage in surveys and whatnot, or in conversations. So there's a lot of people in this larger community, and you have quite the charge in front of you. So let's try to do our best by everyone involved. And the final one I just want to highlight is trust. That's another major component of consensus making and building, is to really trust. And we have to be able to be honest and courageous here, but also trust that the decision that well, again, you all are making recommendations here, but there is an ability for the folks in this space right now on this committee to make recommendations to the best of your ability tonight. Okay. The other two things I just want to remind you about, these hopefully are a little familiar looking. These were slides we used in I think our second meeting back in February, maybe late January. We did a little bit of a drive-by on implicit bias and explicit bias and how they're different and how they're frankly the same. This came off of the Vermont Human Rights Commission and State of Vermont's Racial Equity Office implicit bias training they offered to the state legislature in January. The training's been posted on our website. I encourage people to check that out. But the one big piece I want to remind folks about as we go into this is bias is informed by your personal experiences as a human being on this planet in Vermont, in St. Albans / Fairfield / St. Albans City / town. It's from your prior moments of experience and points of reference in your own life, however you identify and exist on this planet, and things that are familiar to you. So you will always have that lens. So just remember, whatever you have even just thought out in your brain for tonight is coming from implicit bias. So just be aware of that as we go forward. And the other piece I want to highlight here, I mentioned this just briefly before, is when we talk about how we're making decisions, we talked a lot about in the beginning the use of data and the board's request to use data and research and evidence-based information. And we have to do our best to balance this, right? Because when we think about how to make decisions, this isn't necessarily a popularity contest. This isn't a direct vote by the citizens of St. Albans. Your community has decided to appoint a committee to really be deliberative about this process and think things through. So these are different moments, decision-making models that are used elsewhere in Vermont. And I want to just point out the results-based accountability, which is the third bullet here, really thinks about first, who's most impacted by this decision, in this case, this policy recommendation you're making, and what results do we want to have for your community? And then you make your decision based on that. So I really want you to kind of remember students, of course. That's why we're all here. I think that's an obvious consensus point, I hope. And if that's not the case, we have a bigger problem here. But students are the main purpose of the school district. And if anything, we can just think about the impact on students here in our conversation. All right. So here we go. Buckle up for a one-on-one on consensus. And I want to make sure people understand this so that we kind of can walk through the straw polling and whatnot as smoothly as possible. So again, per the request of the school board, this was the goal of how to make this decision together. That consensus making is a method that to make a decision that involves the full group, and the full group can support it or at least live with the outcome of the decision. It removes the majority rules dynamic or voting by majority rule from a group decision process. And it also makes sure that minority voices, meaning like the smaller number of people in the group, are never outvoted or unheard in the process, which is a great thing if you think about it. It's really quite an important part of thinking about different ways to engage with each other. It also makes a space for all ideas to be considered and concerns to also be considered, especially those that are not held by the majority of people in the space. The core components, which are going to be hard in the time we have tonight, are to listen. It's hard work. You need to make sure there's space to address concerns raised. And we also need to understand personally the difference between what you need and your preference. If it's a preference, that's not as strong as a need, and that hopefully informs then this next piece on blocking. As people might have heard, just again, loosely, if you've ever done a drive-by on consensus, there is a role, and I'll go over this in the next slide, around blocking a decision. And this is a tool you can use, which ultimately is a protector of the minority voice in the space, but it does shut the process down until we can have more deliberation and I shouldn't say shut it down. It pauses the process to make sure that there's further discussion, and we go back and we amend, and we go back and discuss, and we go back and ask more questions. So it is possible for one person even, or multiple people, to block us moving forward on a piece or a part of this decision. But we have to use that very carefully and make sure that we're using that on a need that's not being met versus just a preference, which is more of a, not a need, obviously. And the best process for consensus, which is again really hard to do on Zoom and really hard to do with the amount of time we have, is when a group is consistently meeting and practicing it on a routine basis. Think about co-ops, for example, when people live together in a co-op situation, or there's long-term relationships, honesty, equal footing, equal power, all that kind of stuff, and most importantly, time. And these are all limited pieces in our work together. So I just want to name that's the reality for our work. All right, so this is what we're going to do tonight. And I'll now pause and see if there's questions. We're going to go through kind of a process. We're going to explore the ideas. We're going to go through the 3 proposals we have. We'll clarify concepts if there's any confusion, try to make amendments in real time. I'll try to document those in slides so people can follow along with where we're at. We do have 2-minute takers during this portion of the meeting to make sure we're trying to do this as accurately as possible. And then here's my, comic relief moment. These emoji, emoticon, whatever these things are called, need some more options because I needed a side thumb. There is no side thumb in all those options, believe it or not. I looked through them painstakingly today. So we're going to do, there's going to be 4 things you're going to be able to do in a straw poll as we go through this. And the first is agree, which is a simple thumbs up. I've used that before. Everyone hopefully has a thumb here and can give me a thumbs up visually. This will be good for transparency amongst us. I thought about using Zoom polls, and that's not transparent on the front end. It is on the back end, but we'll do a thumbs up if you agree. If you are in agreement with reservation, that means you agree. You have some hesitations, but you're not going to step aside from the process or block, which means I really can't live with this and we got to stop. So if you agree, that's easy. If you're I can sort of live with it. We sort of used that concept before. You can do a sideways thumb, or you can do this weird finger in the air. Just give me a finger somewhere, hopefully the right finger, to just give me a sense of we can proceed, but I have some thoughts. Stand aside is just going to be a thumbs down. that means that I'm just going to stand outside of this. I'm going to let it go through, but I'm not going to oppose it, and I'm not going to sign off on it. But a stand aside is like standing over to the, it's sort of like abstaining without formally abstaining, just to kind of give you a concept. And finally, block is just give me a straight up hand and just let me know that like, nope, something's really not right, and I need us to pause here. When we go through rounds of this, hopefully that's my plan, I'm going to be doing a lot of these straw polls. I'll remind you on these pieces, but if we have too many stand asides, so some finger going, you know, sideways or up, or what, or not up because that's thumbs up, but sideways or whatever, that's going to tell me that we need more dialogue, and we will put that over to the side and see how many pieces we can get to agreement to, and then how much time we have left to get into the stuff that's not, that's just stickier. Okay. And then we'll document on the slides. All right, before we dive in and I ask questions, I want to just remind you, and I'm going to read these because they're very important. This is to each of you personally on the committee. Please be willing to work towards a solution that's best for everyone, not just what's best for you or folks who are like you or the folks you hang out with, that implicit bias piece. Do not get attached to your personal idea or position. Consensus is meant to move you in a way that feels okay, not to move you off of something that doesn't feel okay, but to move you in ways that you feel okay. Remember our group agreements. Let's build some trust and honest space. Let's actively listen. And let's also expect differences and conflict, differences of opinion. Consensus is not about making you all think the same way by the end of this. It's about the process, understanding, and working towards agreement. Okay, I'm going to pause here and stop share for 1 second here. Any questions on the consensus part and the process we're about to use? Okay. Oh, George, yep.
Sorry, wave at me if the signal goes, because I can't tell. But just trying to imagine or visualize, we're doing a poll, as you were saying, and then if it's going sideways or whatever, is there discussion then to kind of further it along, or is it just moving through a whole section of questions to see where we are at first?
So this is what I had in mind. So originally I was going to have us do a little bit of time on values. That was a pre-question I had asked everyone. I'm looking at the time and thinking that I might ask folks to put that in the chat, and I'll put that in a document as we go if I have time, but spend most of our time mapping where people are at, just an initial straw poll on the 3 proposals. And then from there, asking folks to each speak to which proposal, sorry, that's what I mean, speaking to each proposal to map out where there seems to be the most consensus so that we can hone in on an area that seems the most fertile ground. And then if there are pieces, and then do a second round within the area we had the most consensus on those ideas within that proposal. If there's clear agreement, I'll give an example that alignment should happen for training for SROs with whatever the district is doing, then we'll move that over to that's an agreement, you know, that everyone is with. And if that's not, for example, just to use the same example, that is not agreement on that, we'll move that to the side where we need more deliberation. You know, we're probably going to go past 6:30. I'm going to ask for as much participation as we can at this point, and then we'll come up with a plan for what happens after tonight's meeting as needed. There might even be a need for another meeting. I don't want to freak people out, but I just don't want to shortchange this process, and we'll see where we get. So thanks, George. That was a plan because I forgot to tell you how our map are forward. I see Alexa's hand and then Kathy's hand.
I am such a visual learner. Is there a way for you to put the signals in the chat box? Because now that it's off the screen, I can't remember what means what, and I don't want to give the wrong signal. Yes.
I'm wondering if John or Martin can like help me with that somehow while I get us moving forward into it. Because yes, maybe you can just even like write out thumbs up equals agree. I'm gonna copy and paste that to you. Actually, let me just do this let me see if this comes through. These symbols may mean nothing in the Zoom land because it's a text function, I think. Oh, look, hey, I just learned something new. Do you see that, everyone? There you go. So I'll do that again if it gets lost in chat, but those are the signals we're using. Remember, give me a finger that's like sideways or something, not up, because that's confusing with degree. Okay, Kathy?
My question was just around the I guess the preferred way, if there are points that we may have additional points to add that aren't listed as options on here. I'm trying to visualize the straw poll process, and I'm just wondering where it would fit in to add things,
Yeah.
or to clarify things rather than just kind of vote on things. I
Yep.
guess that's what I'm
So
asking.
that's what we're going to do in the first, this mapping piece. This first mapping thing, there's no voting. I'm sorry if I confuse people. We're just going to
Okay.
see where everybody's at. It's sort of
Yeah.
like the
Mhm.
non-straw poll, just to see where everyone's at. And then that's definitely a place to please add in new ideas or alternatives to ideas that were presented. And we'll take the time we need for that. Again, I don't want people to feel panicked and rushed here as we do this, try to do this well. Okay. Any other questions on process? Okay. All right. So I'm going to just show, actually, I'm going to ask folks who are here, you can do like the thumbs up function if your camera's off, or just both on committee and community members. Does everyone have access to the proposals? Because I'm wondering if I can save a little time by not going through those slides and get to committee discussion. Does everyone have like access to that? Okay, it's on the SRO website. I'll post that again. It's under public, under public agenda and minutes. Does anyone, can someone just give me a, now at this point, like a raise your hand function if you do want me to share those slides, just for the sake of time here. Okay, all right. Martin, maybe you can just put the SRO website in one more time for me in the chat as we get going here, if you don't mind. I won't call on you first in our committee discussion. I'll give you a little time. Thank you, Martin. Okay, so we're gonna move now into just mapping out where people are at with these draft proposals that were presented. So proposal 1, 2, and 3, those are not numbered in any particular reason. It's just 1, 2, and 3. So number 1 was to make no substantive changes to the current SRO program. And there were a couple ideas within that around maintaining current duties and responsibilities, current staffing configurations, and then 2 additional that are not major substantive changes to the programs, aligning training requirements for SROs with other district training required of other staff, and then more education on the role of SROs for students and families. So that was proposal number 1. Proposal number 2 was maintain the program with some level of changes, significant changes. So reduction of FTE's status of SROs in all schools or certain schools, modifying the duties of SROs, which include anything from scaling duties back to just safety duties on campus, and removing duties of mentoring, education, etc. Assigning duties to other staff, so those duties that are taken from the SRO duties as now and moving them elsewhere to other staff. Disarming the SRO, aligning the training requirements, as mentioned in the first proposal, and then evaluating the changes in 1 year and assessing what to do going beyond that. And then proposal number 3, briefly, was to end the SRO program, which is ending the SRO program, replacing the student services with other staff who can do the work that are done by the SRO at this moment, and then reassigning, I'm repeating myself, so reassigning, because I'm summarizing, reassigning basically the duties to other qualified staff. There were other additional ideas which are later in the document, but to get us started, I wanted to see where people were at with those 3 proposals. Which one resonates the most with you, either the concepts within that or the whole kind of concept in general. And then if there's any additional ideas you want to pull in from that other ideas list, or things you've been thinking about. Okay. And with that, I have a list of committee members. I will call on people as necessary because I do want you all to speak, but I'm wondering if anyone wants to go first so I don't freak anyone out being the very first person. Courageous leaders, who's ready to jump in first? And I'm going to ask you to keep it to about a minute or so because we can get people's voices in.
I'm sorry, can I ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely, always.
So sorry. So the liaison idea at the police station, I am confused as to what option that would fall under. Would that fall under eliminating the program or keeping it, and that would with a change?
So that would, I mean, this is just my suggestion. I would probably consider that a variation of proposal 2 because it's still an SRO program. It is, but it's just a location difference. So people have referenced Burlington School District. Burlington technically still considers this an SRO program. It's the location that they have moved. They did reduce the number of SROs here as well, but the remaining, I think it's just 1 SRO, is located in Burlington's police headquarters, not a school. So I would say sorry, that's a long answer to number 2. Any other clarifying questions? Okay, and I always welcome those, so don't feel shy, and no apologies, please. Okay, so who would like to go first? Tell us where you're. Oh, Sarah.
I just had a question around the items that are in each of the proposals. Are those pieces to all be included? Are they to be discussed? I guess that's just my question about the proposals.
Yeah, so this idea is that what I'm hoping we can do is to go around and have everyone just kind of weigh in about the one that you're particularly leaning towards. And if there's any modifications in that, like I really like number 2, but I don't like the disarm the SRO piece of it, then that's simply what you would share. I really like number 3, but I want to make sure that we add in, I don't know, something more about using therapy dogs in different ways. I'm just trying to go off the fly here. So that's how we're going about this first round, and then we'll try to drill down more into details after we do this first round of mapping. There is no straw polling going on right now. This is simply just where I want to get a read on where everybody's at the moment, so we don't waste time in places that are not necessary. Okay. Any other clarifying? And I just want to clarify, there's one question in the chat. A block is essentially, the question is the block the same as disagree? No, not necessarily. A block is, I can't live with that. I really need this group to pause and really work through this more. That's what a block means, because a disagree could be, I'm forgetting my own terms here. It could be a stand aside where I disagree, but I'm not going to hold up the process, or I somewhat agree, but this is like the weird finger thing. I somewhat agree, but I have some hesitations or reservations. So disagree can be kind of like in a few other areas, but a block is like, there's some serious no going on for me, and I need us to really stop, please. Okay. All right, friends, you bought some more courageous leadership time. Kathy, did you just come off mute? Ready to go? All right.
I did. So I am leaning towards 2, but I think I have a lot of things to kind of clarify and add to it. Is this a good time to do that?
Yes, you have about a minute or so. So if you can, yeah.
Oh,
please.
okay, great. I'm just thinking that if the program is changed, I guess it's with the idea of what is a student resource officer. So just saying that if the program is changed substantially as part of option 2, that we might suggest a different name for it or recommend a different name for it to indicate, to be more appropriate for actually what it is. As Sarah suggested, the liaison idea, but that's just an opinion. And so I guess some of the things that I didn't see specifically listed here that I think make sense in terms of there are some duties that fall under the SROs now. I believe at all of the locations, from what I recall, in terms of reviewing safety protocols and assisting with the physical safety of the building, making recommendations. I think that's part of the goal. I know that there were some conversations around the safety committee at, I believe, City School, where those were regular meetings that were being held at some point. And I believe the safety committee at City School still exists. But I think that is something that could be of value to keep. So I didn't see that. I mean, it does mention physical safety, so maybe that's included in that, but I just wanted to be more specific around that. And then the liaison issue that Sarah mentioned, that's something as well. And then criminal investigations and safety incidents. I think that's kind of sort of part of the liaison issue, or that may be kind of jumping off of that. And then potentially, and this may also pertain to physical safety as well, but I wanted to add in presence at drop-off pickup. But I think that probably relates to the physical safety issue. And then I wanted to add, there was a lot of discussion during the history group's discussion regarding chintz petitions, which is sort of intervention that the SRO is involved in terms of before, if there is an incident at the school that might lead to an arrest or a criminal charge, that that there is some intervention with a child in need of service petition. So I just wanted to specify that that could also be a part of that option. So.
Kathy, get a box of chocolates for going first. I really appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Way to model. All right, so I'm gonna just start calling on folks because I want to take the awkwardness out of it. So just be ready. All right, and actually I'm going to buy you all a minute to take a deep breath because Connor wasn't able to be with us. But he did send in. Connor's one of our student reps, and Leah will hopefully be joining in a minute. And I asked if it was okay to share this, and he said yes. He said, I support either ending the program or implementing all the changes detailed in the change option, which is number 2. I also support some of the alternate ideas, such as further outreach to BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ and other underrepresented communities, increasing oversight, altering, I believe is what he meant, the funding source, adding more therapy dogs, and having the school board attend trainings before their final decision. And he said, if you would like me to clarify anything, please send me an email. I'm sorry I could not be there tonight. So I'll record that. That's from Connor, our student rep, one of our student reps. All right. So next up, I'm going to go to Shannon. Are you willing, Shannon? Where did you go? My screen. Oh,
Okay.
oh, you're right in front of me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm next to you on my box, but so I am in favor of, it's kind of a cross between 1 and 2. There's modifications and that I'd like to see that I think need to be done. In number 2, where it says assign duties related to supporting students to mental health professionals and stuff, based upon our SRO meeting. SROs do not go by themselves. They have a mental health counselor, or they have somebody with them for those situations. So that's not something. Online bullying, I think that is a criminal crime, and that does need to be left to law enforcement, not to the school staff, because they're not, that it's a legal issue. Let me see here. I'm just going through, I'm sorry. So yes, so there are certainly things that I'd like to see changed, and I think need to be changed as well. But I think that some of these things on here, the law enforcement, it's clarifying what the SROs are doing in the schools and stuff. So and just being cognitive of that, I guess, is the best thing. And I do agree with that, aligning the training requirements with the SRO with the existing staff. Everybody needs to be coherent and on the same page with it. I think that's one of the challenges. You know, I think some of the school staff don't necessarily know what the SROs do and what they are doing, or what they're supposed to be doing there. Clarifying that for them and making it very, you know, it's very clear cut of what they do and what they cannot do in a school. So that is my recommendation.
Thanks, Shannon. John, I'm going to go to you next.
Hello. I am in favor of option 3. And I'm going to bring up on the Maple Run website, they have a core values section. And it's a list of things that they want the district to provide to students. And at the end of it, it says, so all can learn, achieve, and succeed. And I just think that, you know, we have identified actual and potential harm in this program, and all students can't learn, achieve, and succeed if there is that actual and potential harm there. Now, I say that with the knowledge that there is a place for the police department and the school district to have a relationship. I would think there is a necessity for that. However, the reason why I don't go to option 2 is because change is hard. And if we allow this potential and actual harm to remain while we sort things out and make things better, this harm continues. And I don't think that is something that we can that we ought to stand by for this school district. So I think if we pursue option 3 and then build something that preserves the parts of the program that are positive, because they are there, but as it exists, yeah, I don't think, yeah. if there are students who are negatively impacted, we have to full stop and reevaluate. That's my position.
Thanks, John. Moving along to Sarah. You ready?
Yes, I'm leaning towards in the proposal option number 2. I do not want to undermine people's experiences, especially students. And so I do think in terms of the other addendum items that there should be further examination specific to the SRO program and the BIPOC communities, LGBTQ, differently abled. So I think that as a school district that should be looked into a little further in addition to our work. Looking at 2, I do think that there needs to be a relationship for schools and law enforcement. There are different topics, things that come in around safety into schools regularly, that there needs to be that relationship. I do have a concern in option number 2 around removing duties related to online bullying. And I also just have some questions around mentoring. I mean, I think I've heard the schools talk about including mentoring relationships, whether it's a florist, whether it's firefighters, law enforcement, any of those things. I think sometimes those relationships can really, especially for middle schoolers, build in, connections to their community. So I'm not being specific to law enforcement. I'm just saying in general, all, environments around that. So I also wanted to say that I agree with the bullet around just aligning training. I think that there has been attempts to do that, but I just think being more direct around that and involved in cohesive training. And also, I guess I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, Mike, you ready? Actually, I'm gonna tell people who's up next. So I'm gonna go to Mike and then Alexis will be up next. Sorry, I should have done that before. Mike, you ready?
Gee, I wish I had that warning. No, I'm just kidding.
It's because I don't like you, Mike. That's why I just decided to change that.
Very
on you.
obvious.
Sorry.
I'm kidding. So I'm going back and forth between 2 and 3. And I guess it depends on what someone's point of view is on eliminating an officer from the situation. I think we need a dramatic change from what we currently have. I said it from the onset of this committee that I've never attended a school that has ever had a police officer in it. So it's a very foreign thing to me to have a police officer get involved with anything less than a true crime that occurs in a school. With that said, I can't relate at the same time as to 2021's environment of having threats to take place in school. So I can see it both ways, but I think there needs to be some dramatic changes. I know some of the responsibilities that the SROs have now had to do with the LEADS program, which is sort of a modernized version of DARE that was proven to be ineffective 2 decades ago. So I don't think that's necessarily needed. So even if you have an SRO program, maybe take away that function. And if we do have an SRO, whether it's a police officer or a civilian that's hired by the school district to come in and take care of the physical security needs of the building and to act as that liaison, I'm good with either one. And it could be an actual police officer, but someone who is either in plain clothes or in something far more dressed down, maybe someone who doesn't need to necessarily carry a firearm with them. I know there may be logistics for which they must carry one on them at all times, but someone who's not necessarily present 8 hours a day in a school. So right now I'm sort of leaning with a heavily modified number 2. But I at the same time, if I can say real quick, I like what John had to say, where maybe combine with his idea of pulling back the SRO program completely for like a year until whatever the school district decides, take them out, make the modifications, and then reintroduce whatever it is they decide that following school year. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Alexis, to be followed by Martin.
Thank you. I just want to start by saying that I really disagree with option 1. I think with all of the hard work that we've done on the committee and all of the research, I think saying to keep it status quo would be detrimental to the district and to students. I think I am leaning similar to Mike. I think I'm leaning more towards option 2, solely because of the clarifying question I asked at the beginning around where would the police liaison, what option would that fall into? And if that is more looking at option 2, I guess I'm leaning more towards that. I do think some pieces that are missing under the second option is what we've talked about in other meetings, a very clear communication protocol. If we were to move forward with the liaison model and really communicating with staff and families around when SROs or when law enforcement is needing to be involved in certain situations. And I think the data collection and the data monitoring process throughout the whole district would really need to be revamped and revised, so we have more clear data on what capacity schools are needing to use law enforcement and how often and when. I think I guess my final comment is under option 3, where it says and redesign student services. I do think that if we went with the liaison model, we should do both. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't think we should only look at redesigning student services if we completely eliminate the program. I always think there's room to examine our student service model around mental health and restorative practices and to see how we can do things differently or improve how we're doing things.
Thanks, Alexis. So Martin, to be followed by Leah. Has she joined us yet? I don't think so. So so not Leah yet, but George, you'll be on deck. Is that what athletic people say? Okay. Oh, great. So where did you go, Martin? There you are, Martin. Okay.
I'm not sure I'm fully ready to make any definitive calls.
Do you want me to come back to you, Martin?
Yeah, that would be okay.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. That's fine. I should have offered that pass. Apologies to the folks ahead or behind. I will come back to you, Martin. No worries. George, are you ready to go? And then Bob, and then we'll come back to Martin.
Okay. And again, please, Emma, like wave or something if the signal cuts. But seeing it here, I would go, I think, somewhere between the 1 and 2. What strikes me about that is I see number 1 doesn't say no change, but it's no substantive change. And so the degree of what substantive means kind of sticks out to me. Some of the bullets I think do say, hey, take some further steps here. Into 2, which I imagine would be more of a fuller re-envisioning, yet still maintaining the program itself. I think there are some good pieces in that one. But one of the things I do think about that influences me is just that truly the scope of the position as it's written is very broad. And so, yep, there clearly seem to be some elements of that, either through a person or something else, that have caused some negative impact. And in any case, we'd want to, on anything in life, I think we'd want to try to minimize whatever negative impacts as much as possible. So some re-envisioning I think is appropriate. The other part that strikes me too is where some feedback or some information gathering from within the broader community says there's nothing good about this type of program. I cannot agree to that. I see in the where I live and breathe for those hours each day is that there is certainly good that transpires there. And that actually would peel me back, I think, from where John and Mike may have been with like the number 3 one, the number 3 option, in that to have kind of a pause maybe while reassessing. Yep, it means if there's a negative piece, that negative piece wouldn't happen. In the same stretch, a positive piece wouldn't happen either, while there's kind of a reshuffling or re-envisioning, which would leave me again back to there are tweaks to make. Some of the other people have already gone on the try to make sure the training is there and the consistency and pieces there. There are a couple of the other ideas piece. I'm trying to just find the wording on it, but I think like an increase in the feedback or the clarity or the openness of data and instances, I think that's huge. Even if it were maybe not hold off on things for a year, but come back in within a year or two and say, all right, we've made some changes. How's it working? Is it what we're hoping for? And if not, let's do it again. And let's keep pushing it to be something that's stronger, more effective because of how broad the scope of the position is at its core. The other thing I'd say, I think I might've said it a couple of meetings ago, but if the position or the / program were preserved, well, at some point there's going to be a new body, a new person in that role. And it's very much in my mind, a diversity within the community should be a part of either a reflection on hiring or committee driven to peruse candidates and say, bring those voices in, have it be inclusive in that sense and say, okay, community, start to shape who might then be engaging with your students. So in the end, tweaks is where I would go, but tweaks greater or lesser, I'm not quite sure how to categorize that, but I'm going to stop there.
Thanks, George. And you came in loud and clear the whole time. So that's why I wasn't waving at you. Okay, thanks, George. All right, we're going to go to Bob, and then Martin's our last person, unless Leah has jumped in here.
Hi, George, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I was also going between 1 and 2. Couple of reasons. One of the things is that one of the ideals of the program is to make it so that the police officers aren't like a firebox. Oh, there's a cop there. Must be a problem. Well, it's much more than that. Some people tell their kids that. Hopefully it'll overcome that. Just because a police officer is present doesn't mean there's a problem. And hopefully the program will alleviate some of that. Yes, some changes. I think the reporting is, and like George said, take some of that data and get it out and have more reporting between the central office and the officers. I think the program has to be explained a little, much better to staff and to students. Things like that, some changes. I hate to see, and I see it a lot, and I've heard a lot of it. I'll call it as it's written, the ACAB movement, all cops are bad. I'm hearing a lot of that during a lot of these discussions. And there are people that are, they haven't said that, but it's been written all over the place. And, I'm feeling that. And, that's wrong too. Sure, there has been some issues, but the ACAB movement, no, that's not a right movement. One thing that the officer can do is be a point of contact for a student, another point of contact. It's somebody different. Maybe a student with a problem will come to the officer. And unless you have that first point of contact, you can have all the mental health professionals you want, you can have all the counselors. It's not gonna happen unless there is that first point of contact. And I had that myself with students. My wife was a lunchroom monitor at BFA for 20 years. She had people come up to her, students come up to her with problems. You know, without that first point of contact, it's not going to happen. So my feeling is, you know, yes, let's go between 1 and 2, make some changes in the program, but to eliminate it, even for a year, you can't take a program like this and turn it on and off like a light switch. Not going to happen. You just can't do that. So I'd say, you know, let's stick with what we got, not necessarily what we have, but let's make some changes on it. But to eliminate, I think would be a huge mistake. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. And we have Martin, and then Leah looks like she's just joined, but Leah has literally just joined. So Martin, I am going to ask you to go next. Leah, while I do that though, Leah, we are at the point where we're doing a walkthrough of all committee members, and you timed this perfectly. I hope you won your game, by the way. And what we're doing is looking at the 3 draft proposals that are very much in pencil. And just, you know, Leah, folks are just weighing in on which one they're gravitating towards, and also adding in additional thoughts. So some people have said they're between 2 different ideas. Some people have said they're definitely on one idea, but with these modifications, people have pulled ideas from that additional list that I provided of additional ideas that didn't get added into proposal 1, 2, and 3. So hopefully as Martin speaks, you'll get a sense too of how some other folks are approaching this. And then we'll see if you have any thoughts, Leah, after Martin. Ready, Martin?
Not really, but sure. So I'm definitely leaning towards option number 2. I don't feel that we have the option to go with number 1 due to the serious concerns being brought up among a subset of our community. But I also have reservations about number 3. I don't agree with. So just to explain maybe some of my thought process on that. So starting with safety, I mean, from my understanding, after reading all the materials and everything, and I might be wrong, but it does seem to me a lot of the SRO programs started up at an accelerated pace after the shootings, and that was one of the major reasons a lot of those programs got instituted, accepted, regardless of what reservations folk might have had about having police at schools. So safety, it definitely seems to be the genesis of it all. And so the question in my mind is, can you have school safety without using police? Yes, you can. You could hire an outside company to do the protection of the school from incidents like shooting, yes. But our communities, our nation as a whole, we have accepted the institution of the police as our number 1 safety delivery model. So if it's good enough for the community, good enough for the nation, why would it not be good enough for our schools? It doesn't make sense that the police would be able to provide safety for everyone and anyone, but they wouldn't be able to accomplish the same at schools. So I'm not convinced that they don't meet the safety needs, or that hiring an expert protection company that is not a police would really be an improvement on that. So related to safety, obviously, I did want to make a there's the disarm CRO in number 2. From my understanding, I don't think that's possible. From what I read about how the cops work, but I might be wrong. So it seems that if we are to keep the police at school, I don't think disarms SRO would be one of the options available within number two. Number two being the option that I think I'm strongly for. So if I were to assume that the SRO program does meet the demands for safety, then what's the problem? And the problem to me seems to stem from the same issues raised outside of the SRO program with the rest of the police in the nation. You know, the riots or whatever, the shootings, they seem to be related. All those concerns seem to be related with the BLM movement and everything else, and maybe the studies that show that minorities or people of color do seem to have the wrong end of this stick when it comes to justice and interactions with police. And so I could see that risk or that disenfranchisement of rights legitimately possibly extending into the schools through the extension of police presence in schools. And so I think that that is something that would really need to be addressed, and it would have to be addressed through implementation of some kind of changes or programs, and all of that would fall under number two, where we're keeping the SRO, but we are asking for really well thought out, researched, deep changes with a very special focus on the groups that research seems to show end up coming across injustices or unequal treatment under the law. Also, when I look at some of the public comments and on all of that we have come across, it does seem to relate to injustices related to the minorities, whether the minority is minority of color or minority because of their unique disabilities or all of that. So the nation is working hard to address these challenges when it comes to police work. This institution that we believe is the right institution to help enforce the law and keep everyone safe as a nation of laws. And so I think us as a school, we should also work hard to address those challenges. We can't keep status quo. I have another reason for which I disagree with number three, which is just removing the SRO program. Students of color, I have kids of color, being in an environment, in a world where you read in the news propaganda everywhere, about the possibility or the alleging of the police institution not being a friend, not being someone you can trust, and all of that. They're more susceptible to such black and white type of thinking if they don't get the opportunities to meet police individuals and learn that they're humans just like everyone else, and also find out that it is not true that 100% of them have any malice towards people of color. So I think the opportunity to engage with police persons, to know them as friends, as humans, I think is a really big positive for students of color, and sets them up to be able to be full participants once they join the community as adults, whereas they would be handicapped if all they had was access to all this information, news that's negative about the police, and they never get to meet or interact with a police person. So I'm not leaning towards number three for sure. So thanks.
Thanks, Martin. And then Leah, and then I'm going to see where we're at. Leah, so again, just a reminder, I know you're jumping in without the benefit of having heard everyone else's opinions, but just know that people have gone in between all sorts of proposals. So I just want to make sure that you feel like you can absolutely say your piece on it. And I'm asking everyone to be truthful and honest and brave and where your position is so far. Okay. Oh, there you are. Okay, go for it. Those darn phones. Yeah, your camera's off. If you're talking, you are muted. Oh, I think she's coming back in. We'll see. I'm trusting that the second Leah is actual Leah.
I'm sorry. This
You're there.
So crazy.
No, you're good. Okay,
Can
go
you-
for it. Yep, we can hear
Okay.
you.
I think I'm gonna stick with the middle. Probably everyone else is doing, but I think that's the most logical, of course. I think where I'm coming from is being a student, of course, and running the survey with the student survey really kind of opened my eyes, I guess, a bit to those people that are saying like, no, I'm not safe, and or I don't feel safe. And then you have other people that say it makes safer. So I do believe that if you remove it or keep it, it's going to be hurting one and not the other. So somewhere there needs to be a middle ground. I think that there's also a reason why this committee was started, and I think that's an important piece, because I don't think it was started because there was it was doing an amazing job. So there's something wrong, I guess, with the program. So I definitely think it needs to be altered to better fit the needs of some people. And what I've sort of getting on the public comment, or not public comment, on the surveys is the guns and how kids don't feel safe around guns. So I really think that part of the decision should be seeing what you can do about having lethal weapons around kids. And I also think that there should be more involvement with the SROs with the kids, because another huge trend in the surveys was that the kids, they really don't know about SROs, and they don't know what they're there for, or what they can be used as resources. And I think if they are, then they will be more helpful instead of just social interactions, which we were seeing a lot of. So more on that point, I think that would also be beneficial. But yeah, overall, I think the school should be a safe place. And I think that's what a lot of people are saying. And any way that we can make it safer, I think that's what we should be doing in the action plans. And I do think that involves talking about not gun safety, but the guns, and that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. That's exactly how other people did their check-in on the mapping of this. So thanks for jumping in there. All right, folks. So it is 6:40, and I have a suggestion. I wanted to summarize where I think we're at, and then a suggestion on how to proceed for tonight to just a proposal of how to go forward. So we have folks a bit all over the map. And again, to use consensus means that we would want to, what I would ask to do is that we would pause and see if we can get consensus around narrowing in around where most people are landing. Though again, consensus is not about majority rule, which seems to be some modification of the second proposal. Although I want to name again that there are some folks who named proposal 1 and some folks who named proposal 3, which is less modification or very slight modifications and elimination of the program. That's a wide spectrum to try to span when at this point. So I'd like to see if we can have a little bit of clarity on that before we close out tonight. That would take probably a bit more discussion though. And I'm wondering if the committee was willing to stay on until 7. The other thing is, in order to do further work on that, I do think we would need a second meeting to do this well. I don't feel comfortable as your facilitator, and I will do this portion for free because I'm way over my hours anyway at this point, but it is what it is. I really think to do right by this process, we need further time to both sleep on it, for me to like rework something if we can get there tonight, to do a second pass on a second meeting. And for that to work with like timing and whatnot, I was thinking, where did I put that note? I was thinking June 10th, like it would be in another 2 weeks or so, in order to give some more time to think and get some processing out a little bit more, to come back with a full meeting just on that narrowing, if you will, to do a further consensus work on that. That would give us time to kind of hopefully come to recommendations, a draft document that I work on in between that with the co-chairs to be ready for June 11th for the board. We could also move that meeting back earlier, but I want to first start with that's where I'm thinking, that's my suggestion. But I want to first start with the question, are folks able to stay on until 7 to see if we can do some consensus work to narrow the buckets, if you will, even if the buckets look very different? Can people stay on till 7? I'm just wondering if I can get a thumbs up. It's about 15 more minutes or so. Okay, I'm seeing most people need to drop off, feel free, but I'm going to ask until 7. And then a second poll of a second meeting, be it June 10th, or we can come back to a different date. I can check on that, but June 10th meeting, or at least a second meeting to narrow this further. I see Bob's hand.
Yeah, June 10th, just so you know, that is a senior night activity at the school, or actually at Collins Pearly. I don't know if people have seniors or if there are students that are going to be involved with it. It's a movie night.
Okay.
I'm gonna
so I'll come back to, I'll come back to you on another date then. So let's not stress about that. I actually, comic relief for a moment. I thought you meant like senior citizens for some bizarre reason. I don't know where my brain went, because clearly that is not what you meant. I totally get the other seniors. That was just comic relief. Okay. So, all right. So I'm going to get back to you on a second date, but I saw most people sort of at least indicating a willingness to do one more meeting to get this as right as we can feel right about. Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask, this is where we're going to do our first poll, if you will. So I want to remind you, God, it's probably buried in the chat here, but I want to remind you of our hand signals so I get a sense of where people are at. So we're going to test this question. My question to you, I'll repeat it again, is can we narrow the bucket to a version of proposal 2 with a whole lot of modifications? I started sort of documenting that some here, but that's not the piece we're going to get into. But the question to you is, can we narrow to number 2? And if that would mean like, yes, I agree, that's a thumbs up. We can narrow to number 2 with some modifications of ideas people said, some changing out. It's not an endorsement of how number 2 is written. I want to be clear, but it's number 2, that the maintain the program with significant changes is like the idea, the concept. So that would be an agree. This would be, I could agree with that, but I got some hesitations. This would be, again, sorry, yes. A stand aside means like, I'm going to step aside and just let you go forward with that for the sake of the process. And a block is like, Emma, I'm uncomfortable with that and I need to talk more about it. Why? And then we will have that conversation. So I'm going to, again, ask if folks are ready to do a straw poll. It is okay to block. I just want to really emphasize that. It is also okay to be like, look, I don't know, I have hesitations. Do not feel like, that's a problem at all. We will take the time. So again, the question is, can we move to proposal number 2, maintain the program with some level of changes, and the details TBD, but some level of changes. So I'm just going to ask folks to either give me, yes, I agree. I agree, but I have some hesitations or reservations. I'm going to take a side step on this one, or I need the block. I can't let that go forward without some more discussion. All right, this is the time to show me your hands. Show me what you got. Got some hesitations. I got some agree. I got a block. Okay. Got thumbs. Where'd you go, Leah? Leah's a thumb up. Okay. All right. So let's have some discussion about having some more. Let's have some more discussion, because I also saw some sideway reservations. So anyone can certainly jump in here, not just the person who blocked, but I also invite John, if you want to kick us off, since you did bravely put up a block, I'll invite you to do so.
Yeah, totally. And I say all this with the full realization that option 2 is most likely. But I do just wanted to share a couple thoughts that I had as everyone else was going through the options. The first of which, I call us back to one of our tenets for public comment, where we recognize the difference between intent and impact. But I want to listen to that, or I want to think about that in the context of the SROs themselves. Because I had the opportunity to talk with all 3 of the SROs right now. And I can say, based on that conversation, 100%, I believe these are well-intentioned people. it was a very eye-opening conversation for me. And I, in fact, one of the comments that was made during that discussion was the SRO program is the reason why some of these people remain in law enforcement. That's a powerful statement. And as kind of the person who's advocating for option number 3, I feel like it's important to say that I see that. And I see that intent. I see that good intent, and I appreciate it very, very much. But I can't ignore the unintended impact. And that's really what and that's a tough one to deal with, right? Because we mean one thing and we get that intended result in some situations, but then we get the opposite result in others, and that is a rough one. But I don't know that we can look the other way on that, especially when it comes to students. The other thing is a lot of this does have to do with broader public perception of police and law enforcement in general, and that is an uphill battle for sure. But I don't think that it is the responsibility of this police department alone or these officers alone to change that perception. That doesn't feel fair to ask that of them. And it also doesn't feel right to ask that of students to be a part of making that change, because, this year has taught us, this past year has taught us a lot about what students and community rely on school for: stability, safety, all of these things. And if we have students unintentionally going to this place, finally going back to this place that is a source of safety and stability, and not feeling safe, that is a big problem. And that's something that is really, really worthy of a significant change. And my notes are horrible, so that's that's all I have to say on that one. I guess I do, in my advocacy for option 3, I do think that a stop to the program is the right thing to do. I will underline again, I do think that a relationship between the police department and the school district is necessary. And I think finding a way to maintain the positive interactions that students have with the SROs, because that was another thing that came out of the meeting I had with them. Those do exist and those are valuable. But to preserve those at the expense of other students does not feel right to me. And that's why I advocate for number 3. So that's my piece on that.
John, thank you for sharing that. And just a reminder, our job here at Consensus is to actively listen, to be willing to move off of your position, all of us, even if you found yourself in a space where you feel like you have more folks in saying the same position at this point, because this is the deliberative process. This is the value of community dialogue on this, is that we can shift and change. And also our job is to address concerns that your colleagues on this committee are raising on whatever side of this spectrum it is. Okay, so just a reminder there. I saw a few agree with hesitation or reservation. I keep changing up my own words here, my terms. But do any of the folks who had that response want to weigh in before we open up some more discussion and see how folks want to respond? I think it was Bob and maybe one other. Yep, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah. My reservations were just, with number 2 was it depends on what the changes are. As long as it's not a poison pill in there, something that's just, oh, we're going to have the person in street clothes unarmed, no. So it really depends what the changes are. And that's, that's the reason I was wavering on that. I just want to get a little more into the detail.
Thanks, Bob. And we'll get into details more next time. And it is a good example of just remembering as you all go sleep on it, because obviously we're not going to get to a place tonight, of the difference between needs versus preference, because we're going to get to a point where you know, you all are not going to love every single point of the recommendations, and we'll talk about like how people can engage otherwise if you know, and if we have to, like, we do our best to work towards consensus, but please do reflect on what are the fundamental needs you have in coming to consensus and agreement of what you can recommend to the board, and what is a preference that you have, right? So there's a lot of big things here, and there are, you know, just from an outsider's view, there are some more minor things. So just keep that in mind. As I'm not trying to place blame on anyone's comment here, but let's use that as part of our processes, as part of a consensus piece. Okay, so there was, thank you, Bob. And Kathy, did you also have
I did.
Hesitation? Yep.
Yeah, just because the one thing that I forgot to bring up, which was actually, you know, and after hearing what John said, I the benefit of number 3 is a chance to rebuild. And I think that's sort of what I was thinking in terms of, if it's a liaison program, is it still an SRO program? And does it make more sense to dismantle and then rebuild? And then the other question that came up that I forgot to bring up because I wasn't looking at the last page, and something triggered me there, was that there is a question of the funding, and not that we can solve that issue, but I don't know that it was something that came up right before the last meeting that we had, in terms of understanding the financial impact if the program is no longer going to be funded by Medicaid. You know, what is the impact on the community? So my concern about, I mean, I assume that there would be funding changes if we talked about number 2, if we made changes to the program, that there, you know, so I guess I just wanted to note the funding issue. And that's of grave concern to me, you know, as well as many of the things that John brought up. So that's my reservation, is just sort of, do we have enough information to say, you know, or do we have, I don't know. I mean, we have a lot of information, we've gathered a lot of information, but I think that there are some unresolved things, and I don't know that I feel like what I could say with certainty is that number 1 would be off the table. I mean, that would be something I could agree to, but I'm still, I think either 2 or 3 could work if we continue to have the conversation and talk about the modifications and talking, you know, it feels like, I don't know, it feels like I'm not seeing a lot of clarity, I guess, between 2 or 3, because we could change it to the point, we could make modifications to the point where, you know, we essentially land at number 3. So I guess that's my reservation.
Thanks, Kathy. So among the 3 folks who just spoke, there were some concerns raised. And so part of what I want to offer to the rest of the committee now is to talk through a little bit. Part of our charge as consensus building is to listen to those and try to address them, either through you know, modifications, further amendments to this proposal, to see if we can find a new settling point for this first question of, like, what's the bucket that we're trying to really work towards, and then details for the next meeting. So reactions, thoughts, responses to the concerns raised by your 3 colleagues. George?
Just a couple of them. Like, it kind of strikes me like if we're in a position to think it through additionally, I look at 2 as the option there that gives us the most flexibility to go then in any conceivable direction. The funding issue, even last time, just I understand that it's a valid issue for somebody somewhere, but it's not on us as a committee to consider payment or a funding stream, you know, for any of this. And I think, or I feel anyway, that goes back to the charge that the committee has, and that a funding issue rests with somebody else. What does strike me is a potential, and I realize that's almost stupid to say, at least in that way, but like the option 3, taking up the breadth of the scope of the one position to, where's my wording here? Replacing with increased student services, who I can tell you our school is tapped in terms of the guidance and the behavioral people. And so, yeah, you'd be talking about additional staffing that way. And in addition there, under number 3, the final bullet of reassigning some of the other duties then to other qualified staff, if that's security, servicing, whatever. I would wonder, I'll phrase it that way, I would wonder about the bottom line, dollars and cents part of it. If it's a budget issue for somebody somewhere, that's really not ours to wrestle with. We're making recommendations. But if you were to replace one person at a school with 3 to 4 additional people at a school, there is a dollars and cents portion of that, again, for those decision makers who have to worry about that sort of thing. But I'm left with seeing 2, which is why I went with the unqualified thumb up on that one. Your recommendation, or sorry, your phrasing there in the poll was 2, understanding it's with modifications to be determined what those modifications are. And so I was content with that this evening in this purpose.
Thanks, George. Other responses and or, again, responding to the concerns raised by your colleagues, because we're trying to work towards seeing if we could just even get to a place tonight. And it's okay if we can't. We were expecting, right? Expecting disagreement, and that's part of this process. So it's okay if we end without that. So we have a couple more minutes left. Any additional thoughts folks would like to have to respond to those concerns raised? And I heard things like the students need to feel safe. I heard around relationships between police and school being a necessary thing. Well, that's not a concern. I think that's everybody was to some extent, but the students need to feel safe. I heard a concern about the SROs, if they say not being in uniform. I heard issues around or concern around, do we have enough information? I'm just paraphrasing here, but those are the kinds of concerns I was actively hearing, or that's not all of them, from the 3 folks who were not in full agreement. Oh, Leah, yep, sorry. You're tiny on my screen, so there you go.
Yeah, a point that I'm thinking about is with the modifications that we might make, would they still be considered as like police? Like if we start removing guns and maybe not doing as much, I just think that would also impact if we're actually leaning towards 3 or 2, depending on what we decide. And I just thought that was important to, if that makes sense. Anybody?
And Leah, just to clarify, in terms of like the concern around the safety for the students need to feel safe, was that in response to that piece?
Yeah, I'm just thinking sort of along the line, like what is a police officer in the school, and if that requires having like a gun or something like that, then if we take that away, is it an actual SRO? Which would
think Leah. Did you want to finish that thought? I'm sorry. Oh, you're good. Okay. Other responses to either those concerns I sort of paraphrased a couple of them, or other ones before we wrap up? Alexis?
I'm feeling the need just to be transparent about the internal struggle that I'm having, not only on this committee, but in my role in the work that I do at the district. And I think the challenge for me personally is I know that there are some legal issues that happen in our schools where we need the support from law enforcement. However, things like students hiding in bathrooms and putting their hood up and putting their heads down on their desks. I know there's some families that pull in every day or drop their kids off and they see the police vehicle parked out front, and that can be very triggering. and very traumatizing for some individuals. That also can't be minimized, and that can't be ignored. So I'm just feeling the need just to be transparent, because I think we need to have the hard conversations in doing this work, and that's the balance that I'm having a hard time with. Which is again why I ask repeatedly the clarification around the liaison, because we all have our perception is reality for all of us as individuals, and we can only speak our own truths and our own journey. So I never want to speak for somebody else because that's not my story to share. But I know that, you know, students hiding in bathrooms is real. And I know the sight of, you know, a police vehicle cannot be welcoming to families, but I also know we rely heavily on our SROs when there's some serious legal issues that happen in our buildings with students and families. So just wanted to be transparent.
I appreciate that, Alexis, because I think it's also just modeling. We're trying to build sort of a space of trust that we can say what needs to be said. We can be transparent in our process of how you've gotten to your places, the information that we've collected thus far, and try to put it all together. This is complicated. We've said this multiple times. This is no easy charge. And I commend you all for signing up for this committee. And if it was easy, this would not take this many weeks, and districts take a lot longer sometimes to do all these pieces. So we're at 7:03. I've already borrowed way beyond the time of what we had originally scheduled, and I appreciate people's willingness to stay here because we're trying to get this as right as we can. So here's what we're going to do. We're not at a place where I think we have consensus. I don't see enough kind of, you know, movement off of where we're at. So we're going to put a pin in it. We're going to come back to this. We're going to get the minutes out to you, as well as I'm going to try to capture a little bit more of what proposal 2 look like, not because I think we're there for consensus, but for documenting, kind of putting the pieces together to make sure it's in the minutes. And I'm gonna check in with sort of the scheduling. I'll send out a doodle first thing tomorrow if people are familiar with doodles, to try to get a meeting not on June 10th, but sooner than June 10th, so we can come back and do more deliberation. And I'll do a little more thinking, but I think because each meeting needs to have public comment, rightfully so, we might need a 2-hour block again. I don't want people to kind of expect us to end at 6:30 and then to be shortchanging the process. So all of that is to stay tuned for that. I encourage you to be doing some more thinking. Again, a reminder as we sign off here that to use consensus, we're really trying to respond to and listen to the concerns your colleagues are raising, with the ability and willingness to move off of your position as necessary. What is your ultimate need in this for all the information you've gathered, the things you've heard from folks, from your community members, the things that you've learned and read on the staff surveys, the student surveys, the community surveys, all the scholarly articles you've collected. There's a lot there. We have a lot of information. And then what's your preference? Because the preference piece is really, I just want to emphasize, you have to be willing to let go of some stuff here to get to a place of agreement. And whatever that might be, we have to kind of figure out where the points of agreement are, and then where we have to say these were not the points of agreement, and let the board have that information and move forward from there. Okay. Any final questions on any of that before I release you from my clutches here? Sounds like a weird like Wizard of Oz reference, but okay. Trying to get one little crack of a smile here because this is hard work all, and I really appreciate everyone, leaning in. Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions, so we will post that meeting publicly for folks who are following at home. I really, as always, appreciate all the community engagement tonight and the members who stayed on from the community well past our bedtime here for this meeting. We'll further, post all the documents necessary for folks to be fully in the loop before we start our next meeting. And I think that's it for now. So I see some other notes in the chat here, so let me just make sure there's nothing else I need to say before we go. Okay, I see a couple date things, so I'll keep that all in mind with dates. Okay, I think, all right, we'll do some clarifications as well next time. All right, folks, I'm gonna let you all head off. We'll document the chats as we normally do for public record. Martin, I think we can stop recording. And all right, folks, you have some homework, which is thinking on your proposals that we have in there, and some other further thinking to bring into the next space, okay? All right, all. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Appreciate all of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone, thank you.